Thank you for joining us for our midday devotional. I'm Dr. Bruce McClure, the local minister here at the Prince George's Church of Christ, and we're located at 7800 Central Avenue, right here in Landover, Maryland. You may hear me trying to catch my breath. Uh, I was actually out on the parking lot, uh, and we were doing a couple of things out there as well. And as time would have it, the gentleman needed to see me exactly at the time when I knew we would do our midday devotional. And I knew that was going to happen, but be that as it may, I made it back in. And I just hope, trust, and pray that your day is going well up to this point. Throughout the week, we have taken a look at what is known as the Passion Week. And many times we hear terminology, but the greater question is, do we understand what that terminology really means? Uh, so we've talked about the week leading to the crucifixion of Jesus. Uh, if you recall on Monday, we looked at the prophecy about the week in Zechariah chapter 9, verse number 9. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding on a donkey, a colt, and the fowl of a donkey. We then looked at, during this final week of Jesus's life on earth, we looked at the reception that he received from the people and how the common people received him. And we also looked at the reception that Jesus received from the priest. And then we looked at the reception that Jesus received from the sick and from the children. Uh, and then we looked at the reception that Jesus received from nature. Remember the story of the fig tree and how the fig tree should have been in bloom, and also it should have had figs at that time of the year, and it did not. And then on Tuesday, we looked at how, we looked at how Jesus was regarded by the scribes and the Pharisees, and the caution that Jesus gave to his disciples about the scribes and the Pharisees, and how they loved the high places of the biggest seats in the temple and to be known and loved by men, but they would not lift their fingers to do anything that was contained in the law. Uh, and then on Wednesday, we looked at the predictions of the future in Matthew 24, the destruction of Jerusalem, the end of time, and the second coming of Christ. Uh, and then on yesterday, on Thursday, we looked at the day of the betrayal of Jesus, and how one of his close friends, he called him my friend, one of those that was called by him to be an apostle. We looked at how Judas Iscariot would betray your Lord and mine with a kiss of friendship, a kiss of closeness, a kiss of camaraderie, and yet Jesus still called him friend. Today, I want us to look at the last day of this Passion Week as we look at the crucifixion. Uh, and I want you to think with me, and I want you to think critically with me about what the crucifixion day was like. A dark day in the history of this world. And yet it was a day that had to transact in order for Jesus to be the atonement, the sacrifice for the sins of the world. Sometimes I believe we have sanitized the story of the crucifixion in such a way that we get sort of a cursory glimpse at what it must have been like. Conceptually, we can somewhat conceptualize what it was like, but I just don't know if we really understand how heinous and how cruel that day of crucifixion was with Jesus. So today, I want us to look at the crucifixion. Now, remember, before Jesus is hung on Calvary's cross, he's beaten within an inch of his life. So let's look at the true depiction of flogging. If you look at the picture to your left, I know it's grotesque, I know it's bloody, but I want you to see what this beating was like. This is a picture of Roman soldiers in the background. These are the arms of the Lord, or the arms of a person tied to a pole. And this is a whip in the hands of a Roman soldier. And yes, this is the just bloody body. Every inch of the body has been beaten, and blood is everywhere. I think this more depicts what the beating was like than just reading it on the page and not really grasping what took place before the crucifixion. But yet this was a preparatory step toward the crucifixion. Flagellation was the action of flogging or whipping or lashing the human body using items such as whips, rods, or the cat of nine tails. That's where they would take uh, a whip and they would tie glass, or they would tie iron or some other abrasive source material into the ends. And as the ends were hitting the body, it was also pulling the flesh. The act of flogging was used on people who were unwilling subjects and was viewed as the most masochistic form of cruelty. These people who did the beating had to have just the human emotion taken from them. They were satanistic. It was evil. In Matthew 27, verse number 26, then released Pilate Barabbas unto the crowd. And when he had scourged Jesus, he then delivered him to be crucified. Now, this is the crucifixion day. This is what scourging looked like. And we haven't even come to the cross yet. Do you see how de-energized this individual is? Look at Mark's rendition of that. So Pilate, willing to content the people, released Barabbas unto them and delivered Jesus when he had scourged him to be crucified. Again, I want you to get a working visual of what that beating was like. Pilate, therefore, according to John's Gospel, chapter 19, verse 1, took Jesus and scourged him. Now, Pilate didn't do the beating, he ordered him to be beaten. But I want you to get the picture of what that beating was like even before Jesus went to Calvary's cross. It was a sick scene, to say the least. Now, let's talk about crucifixion. What is crucifixion? In Matthew chapter 27, verse number 1, very early in the morning, the leading priest and the elders of the people met again to lay plans for putting Jesus to death. This is what you've got to understand. The objective of crucifixion was to kill the person. It wasn't to scare them straight. It wasn't to get them up on the crucifixion cross and say, have you learned a lesson now? The objective of crucifixion was to kill the individual. In Matthew 27, verses 22 and 23, Pilate responded, then what should I do with Jesus who is called the Messiah? They shouted back, crucify him. Why? Pilate demanded. What crime has he committed? But the mob roared even louder, crucify him. The reason Pilate asked the question about crime is because he understood you cannot kill a person by crucifixion if they haven't committed a crime that is commensurate with that punishment. So when they cried, crucify him, they're saying, fasten him to the pole or the stake or the cross. It was a method of capital punishment where the victim is either tied or nailed to a large wooden beam and left to hang up to several days until that body finally died from exhaustion and asphyxiation. Now, crucifixion, by its very definition, at the moment the person was nailed to the cross, crucifixion wasn't designed at that moment of nailing them. It wasn't designed to kill them in that moment. It was an event that happened over time. The purpose of crucifixion was to provide a gruesome and shameful public way to execute criminals, slaves, rebels, pirates, despised enemies, so that the masses would be dissuaded from doing similar deeds. The goal was not just to kill the criminal, but to mutilate and to dishonor the body of the person by displaying their shame publicly. And we'll talk about that later. It wasn't unusual to have or to leave the body on the cross until it decayed or fell to the earth. Now, condemned Roman citizens were exempted from crucifixion, except in very, very, very exceptional critical cases, like if they were accused of treason or trying to insurrect or overthrow the country. And it was their way of bringing them down to the state of a slave and then saying, you're no better off than a slave or a vagabond in our country. I want you to think about the scene. of the crucifixion. Again, I don't think TV does it good. The individual was stripped naked. When you look at the text of Matthew chapter 27, verse 35, Mark chapter 15, verse 24, Luke chapter 23, verse 34, and John 19, verses 23 through 25. Each of the Gospels will say that the individual, Jesus in this case, is stripped naked. Well, he had already been beaten. The individual had lost a large amount of blood due to the beating. Jesus had to carry that horizontal beam to the place of execution. Now, if you recall, he had already been beaten within an inch of his life. And if you recall, all of these open abrasions. And if you see him, does he look like he has a lot of energy? No. But it was expected of the individual who was being crucified that they carry their own cross to the crucifixion. The individual had to carry that beam to the place of execution. That's a scary scene. The people will ultimately complete the process, or the people who would ultimately complete the process were experts. The executioners, they were experts in their craft. And it was under the oversight of a centurion commander. And that centurion, if you recall, the centurion made sure that whatever job was assigned to them, that job was always completed. So the soldiers that are there and that are being supervised by that centurion, they were experts in what they were doing. The experts would frequently break the prisoner's legs to hasten death, and they usually would forbade that person who had died on that cross. They were saying, oh no, nobody comes close to this cross to get this body for burial. Now in John chapter 19, verses 32 and 33, then came the soldiers, and they brake the legs of the first and of the other which was crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was dead already, they brake not his legs. Not a bone in the body of Jesus was broken, because he was already dead when they came to him. The message in that crucifixion scene is simple. Jesus had already told them, you don't take my life. I lay my life down. And if I have the power to lay it down, then I also have the power to get it up again. So when they came to Jesus to take his life, he had already said, you don't take my life. I surrender my life. I give it up. And he dies on that cross. Let me show you one more slide. The end of the crucifixion. In John 19, verse number 32 and verse number 33, then came the soldiers and brake the leg of the first, and they brake the leg of the one that was with him. But Jesus is already dead. That's the end of the crucifixion, the death process, right? But then look at the burial. In Matthew chapter 27, verses 57 and 58, when the evening was come, there came a rich man named Arimathea, or Joseph of Arimathea, who was also with Jesus as a disciple. He was a disciple. He went to Pilate and begged the body of Jesus. Remember, I said typically, you didn't get the body back. The body stayed on that cross as a warning to others who passed by. And that body literally rotted on that cross. But Pilate, at the bequest of Joseph of Arimathea, commanded the body be delivered. See, unless Pilate ordered that, the centurion couldn't deliver it. Unless Pilate ordered that, then Jesus's disciples could not go to that cross. What you'll see is Mary Magdalene and the other Mary are sitting over against the sepulcher, but what they could not do is go to that cross. But Pilate allows Joseph of Arimathea to get the body, and he wraps it in a clean linen cloth, and he laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out in the rocks. And he rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulcher, and he left. This is what Joseph of Arimathea does. Because as far as Pilate was concerned, as far as the centurion was concerned, the crucifixion was finished. And they just returned to life as usual after crucifying the Son of God. Now, remember earlier in the week when we talked about the preparation one day before the betrayal? Let's go back and revisit that. Because on the crucifixion day, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary are over against the sepulcher. But if you recall, early on the first day of the week, they returned to the sepulcher. And they returned to prepare the body. But the body had already been prepared. And I think we may have overlooked that. Look back at the text of Matthew 26, verses 6 through 13. Meanwhile, Jesus was in Bethany at the home of Simon, a man who had previously had leprosy. While he was eating, a woman came in with a beautiful alabaster jar of expensive perfume and poured it over his head. The disciples were indignant when they saw it. What a waste, they said. It could have been sold for a high price and the money given to the poor. But Jesus, aware of this, replied, "Why criticize this woman for doing such a good thing to me? You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. She has poured this perfume on me to prepare my body for burial." Isn't that amazing? See, Jesus already knew what that crucifixion was going to be like. He already knew the Roman protocol for crucifixion. He already understood that once you're crucified, all of this preparation thing and preparing the body that's not going to happen. It was because that was known by the Lord that in preparation for his crucifixion, he welcomes the woman with the alabaster box, because he understood in this case, the preparation of his body has to be done before the burial. Isn't that a phenomenal story? As we approach the resurrection now, this would be the day of the crucifixion. But I hope that you're able to join us on Sunday as we talk about the resurrection. What a day that had to have been. Is going through this Passion Week, and then 3 days later, Christ arrives. He's arisen. He's called back from death. And he overcomes the power of death and the grave. And he now becomes our atonement for sin. Pray with me. Father, we thank you so much that Jesus was willing to be our sacrifice, and that he was willing to go through the public humiliation as a slave. Yet he was the Lord. He was your son. We're thankful, Father, that he was willing to bear the public shame that each of us should have borne. And I just pray that we will learn day by day to be more appreciative, to be more thankful for his death that should have been ours. I pray that you will bless our efforts to encourage others to embrace Christ and to have a deeper resolve to follow him. Keep us, and I just pray that as we approach this Resurrection Sunday, that we will celebrate the arisen Savior. Through Christ I pray. Amen. I look forward to seeing you Sunday morning, 9 o'clock for Bible study, 10 o'clock for worship. I've been at the building almost literally since sunrise this morning. You received an email on yesterday. For those who have not been to the building since the pandemic, I want you to know that the tent is erected on the parking lot. That's why I was running just 2 or 3 minutes late getting inside. But the tent is up. The tent is heated, and the tent has indoor lighting. You will love being under the big top tomorrow. There will be chairs inside. There will be sanitation things inside, like hand sanitizer for you to wash your hands. You'll have access to the bathrooms. Communion will be made available to you. And yet, if you're not quite comfortable coming inside the building, we have a huge, I mean, literally a huge tent that was on site early this morning, and it is heated, it is enclosed, it is lit, and I will assure you that you will have a great time in the Lord on this Lord's Day. A live video feed will be linked from inside the building to the tent, so you won't miss anything outside. In fact, people on the inside of the regular building may want to sneak out to the big top. But be that as it may, we're looking forward to having a great time in the Lord, celebrating our resurrected Lord this Lord's Day. Keep all of us in prayer as a church, as a community, and we look forward to seeing you on Sunday morning. God bless each of you.